Hello, everybody. Welcome to Quantum Witch Cafe, and welcome to our third book club where we read Operation Trojan Horse by John Keel. And before we get started, I want to say hi to everybody that's in the live, and I want to say thank you for joining us. And I see a lot of people that I've seen before, so thank you for your support. And if you're listening to this audio on Anomalous Podcast Network, thank you so much for that as well. And if you're watching later, thank you as well. And hit that like and subscribe if you want to show some support. And in the link, there's other ways to show all these lovely people support as well. All right, so we read Operation Trojan Horse. Everybody in the chat knows you guys. But do we want to do a quick introduction of everybody just in case somebody's listening and doesn't know who one of us is? So let's start with Graham. Graham, who are you?
Okay. I'm a writer and a researcher. I wrote UFOs Before Roswell, European Foo Fighters, 1940 to 1945, which was released last year. I'm working on a couple of other books at the moment, but no details as yet. So yeah, that's me.
Great. Quick note on Spaghetti, guys. He got hit by that blizzard, so he's helping some neighbors dig out their car. There's some elderly neighbors he said he's helping, and he got hit pretty well too. So he's just helping out with that. He's sorry he couldn't be here, but he will be here next time. And we have this guy joining. There he
Hi, what's up?
is.
Hello.
So we're just introducing ourselves right now, Sean. So Nathan, you want to tell everybody who you are in case somebody's listening that doesn't know you?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Nathan. I'm one of the hosts of Calling All Beings. I'm also a co-host with Exo Academian on Liminal Frames. And you can find me on Twitter at AwaifSoul. And I'm a big fan of everyone in this room, so I'm just really happy to be here and listen to what these folks have to say.
Awesome. And let's get Vinny next because he says he might disappear due to internet stuff.
Yeah, do you know what? So far, so good. Thank you for letting me be the kind of test for my system. I've patched it, I think. But for everybody that doesn't know, I am Vinny from Disclosure Team. I host the Disclosure Team podcast on YouTube.
I don't recognize you. Where are you? I'm just kidding. I thought your name was Blonde Jesus. I'm just kidding.
Vinny, aka Blonde Jesus. I host the Disclosure Team YouTube channel, podcast also out on the Anomalous Podcast Network with Pricilla and Graham. I run Disclosure Team on Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, so if I dip out at any time, good to see you. Nice knowing you.
We got his book suggestion too. And then Jay, who are you? Where are you from? It sounds so funny. Where are you?
Well, right now I'm in Jersey City, New Jersey, where we are enduring. I'm pointing at the window as if you could see out of it, even though the blinds are there. A blizzard. The Northeast is enduring a blizzard right now. So it's a wonderful day to be with you all, snug in the apartment. I'm a co-founder of the Experiencer Group. And let's see, what else? I'm a Wednesday co-host of Witness Citizen with Sean, who's directly below me right now.
My Wednesday friend.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. And Olaf, I'm sure everybody knows who you are, but we have Olaf Rockner. Who are you? What do you do?
So I'm an artist from Sweden, and I've been interested in UFOs and stuff for my entire life. So now it's kind of gelled, and I get to work a lot with the community and make logos and illustrations and lots of cool collaborations. And so it's really nice to feel the community having my back, so to speak. So that's what I do.
Thank you so much. And I have everybody's information in the description. So if you're interested in any of these people, which everybody I know listening is, go check them out. And then we have Sean, who was almost a co-host with him, but sometimes things just don't work out.
Yeah, I know.
Sean's our document guy, and he's the one that actually recommended this book. So Sean, who are you? What do you do?
Well, first to address the co-host thing, if you want to get into the personal reasons and the argument we had,
I was just joking.
I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding.
I was like, oh man,
I'm totally kidding.
Somebody didn't have their snack.
No. Yeah. I tried to do the night shows, but my bedtime was too early, and no, just didn't work out. But hopefully, our timing will, be succinct together at one point. We can try it again. But
Well, we'll be here once a month together at least.
Yeah.
Book club, so.
Yeah. So I'm Witness Citizen. I have a YouTube channel. I've been doing that since, I don't know, maybe April last year or so. I've done probably 320 some episodes since then, roughly. And yeah, I mean, everybody here is my friend in some way, shape, or form. And I wouldn't have met any of you guys without doing this. So it's pretty cool just being here. You can find me on Twitter and all that stuff. I do old document stuff. I bring on guests. Just try to have like campfire, easygoing talks with everybody. And there's a couple people here that haven't been on my show yet. So like Olaf, we got to get on there. Nathan, Graham. It's been a long time, but Graham's been on there multiple times. And yeah, Pricilla, Jay, and Benny too. So I think what you're doing is awesome. I'm glad we picked this book too, because I think it's pretty good.
And from Mostly Space, Sean forgot to leave something out of his bio that he is the UFO Bob Dylan. So.
I hate Bob Dylan. I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. No. I love Bob Dylan. Yeah, no.
You're just making drama.
Yeah, I'm just making
guys. If you get Sean at the right time.
A little sarcastic sometimes and dry. Yeah. So,
real dry, guys. Real dry.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is go around and kind of say, like, what is your overall impression of the book? Like, did you like it? What did you like about it? Like, just like general thoughts as you're reading it and when you're done reading it. And we'll start with Graham.
Okay, so I first read this book probably in the late 70s or early 80s, so that's as long ago. And I realized when I was actually I was listening to it this time because I don't have a hard copy of it. It was almost incredibly difficult to find a copy that I could afford because I didn't have a copy of it when leading up to this. That's by the by. So I was actually listening to an audible version of it, same thing.
Me too.
But when I was listening to it, I was realizing that I'd completely forgotten everything about the book. I had a general sense of what it was like from what I can remember, but what I can remember wasn't exactly the same as what I was listening to. So my impressions of sort of hearing it again, if you like, is that it's very much a child of its times. That kind of era was at the end of the contactee era. And that comes out in the book because it has a huge section devoted to the people who believed they were in contact with star beings. And they were passing on messages of, destruction of the earth or look after the planet and all this kind of stuff. But also some of the fraudsters that were around then as well. But then the stories that he tells, it's more the kind of flowery language. It's not based, that don't go into nuts and bolts too much of the stories. There's some in-depth analysis, but there's not a lot. It's quite superficial in a way. But also that's because they didn't have access to the records they did back then. It was mostly based on newspaper reports, things that came out in UFO newsletters, and just talking and telephoning witnesses. Because Keel did a lot of that. People who don't obviously remember that he went round like Point Pleasant in West Virginia for the Mothman stories, just going knocking on people's doors, ringing people up, talking to the local newspaper editor, things like that, and actually just putting the boots on the ground and going around and literally just chatting to people. And that's how he got his information. And that's a kind of old school thing that doesn't seem to happen anymore. With social media, today it's really easy to get in touch with people and get the side of stories, whereas back then it was incredibly difficult. And of course, all the official records weren't there. So you have that kind of, it's not a detachment, but it's just really difficult for researchers back then to be able to get the kind of information that we're able to get now. And also looking back to these stories now that we have releases of information and documents like Sean's been plowing through and I've been doing for a project I'm working on, that wasn't a thing back then. They were going on stuff that was just in the public realm, newspaper reports and that kind of thing. So you can see that coming out in the book. But then he talks about the biblical side of thing as well. Now that resonates with me because the first book I ever read on the UFO subject, the one that was given to me by my mother by mistake, was Brinsley Poa Trench's The Mysterious Visitors. And it basically was a very heavy emphasis on things like Ezekiel and the wheels, within wheels, that kind of stuff. And Keel talks a lot about that in the book as well. So that kind of was quite comforting in a way, because that took me back to my childhood. And the things I remember from reading back then, it was all very, very comfortable. It was all very familiar, even though I'd forgot the book. So that came out. But then there was other things that I know now which are false. And actually, Keel himself said, look, there's not much substance to this. He talked about the Spitsbergen crash of 1952, which is a proven hoax. And I mentioned that in the book I wrote about the Foo Fighters, because it's got a Nazi angle to it. So there's a few things there. There's the kind of familiarity, but it's set of a time. It dwells a lot on the contactees, and it dwells a lot on the biblical references. And it's split different ways. So it's a bit of everything, really. It's a hodgepodge in a way, but it's written in a really kind of homespun, very, very sort of nice fashion. It's very easy to read. It's like a fireside book, the kind of thing that you give to your grandparents if you wanted to get them into the UFO subject. It's a nice, easy read.
You gotta like the voices on the audiobook, when he does like the alien voices.
Now I need it.
The narrator for the audible book is great. He doesn't do the really fancy voices like Ross Coulthard did for him, but he's good. And he's got that kind of really engaging voice, and that really helped, actually, because actually at times I thought I was listening to Keel, because he talked in the same kind of way. And when I've heard Keel being interviewed, it's not his voice, obviously, and it's nothing really like his voice, but it's the same kind of manner. And that really helped in understanding how it was, all laid out. But yeah, I'll shut up now.
Well, that's great. And you bring up a lot of points, because when I was reading it, I knew it was an older book, and it was like something I wanted to read. But when I looked at the accounts, I kept like thinking like, well, Graham would have done this and that. And then I realized too, like, oh, well, he was like, because I was reading his book, he's like, I would go ask this person. And I'm like, yeah, that's like, you're right. It's the old school way of research. You ask somebody like face to face, and we have information like right in front of us at all times. So he was definitely ahead of his time. Nathan, what did you think of the book, and what are your impressions of the overall book?
Yeah, so thanks for letting me talk after Graham. I really appreciate that. I love the book, and I tweeted the other day that it's a foundational book in ufology, and I think that's true, whether or not you agree with it. I think it's just it's kind of part of the, should be part of every ufologist's library, because it's just such a seminal work. What I love about it, and I read it a couple years ago, and picking it up again after having gone through my own journey in the last couple of years, it was really interesting to kind of dip back into some of the conclusions that Keel came to. And what I loved in flipping through it is just this mental image that I have of Keel, like literally like transforming over, throughout the course of the book. Like I could just see him just like pulling his hair out. It's just getting crazier and crazier, and him kind of losing his mind, being very frustrated with the effort, generally. And I agree with Graham and sort of the approachability of the prose. It's very easy to read. It's a page turner. I mean, I think once you pick it up, you're going to get through it pretty quickly. The chapters, I find that there's, he does walk you through some different anecdotes, but they're all, it has a similar flow. Every chapter kind of really lands in the same place. He is trying to reinforce the conclusion. And I think the main conclusion that I came to anyway is the absurdity of it all. It's just absolutely insane. All of these different accounts that he is studying, the oral tradition, as you mentioned, Graham, the newspaper clippings, it's just a lot to try to package up into a nice little, okay, this is what it is. And I think you can really feel his frustration that he wanted to come to a nice kind of clean conclusion as to whatever the phenomenon is, what it represents. And I think he landed in the right place, which is it's stranger than we think, essentially. There are no easy conclusions. We need to sort of lean into the strangeness of it all, and find that the answer is going to be there wherever that may lead us. And I think, one of the quotes that I had, it was kind of earlier in the book, when he talked about the I'll mention it really quickly because I think it sort of framed it up well. But he says, if I were writing a book on, say, the Civil War, I would go to these very same sources, these old newspapers, historical records, letters of the actual participants, and I would produce a book that would be accepted by scholars and historians with little or no questions asked. But flying saucers have been dragged down by the amateur theorists and thrown into disrepute by the believers in extraterrestrial visitants. Their efforts have produced skeptics who have found the obvious flaws in the beliefs and have therefore decided that all UFO data are equally invalid. So, he's essentially saying that, when we're doing history, we are going back through looking at these newspaper clippings. We're kind of looking at how people saw events through the cultural understandings of their time. And we are drawing conclusions on what really happened. But as any good historian will tell you, it's when you're writing a book on history, you're also doing the same thing, right? So you're interpreting what you're reading and kind of packaging that up in its own narrative as well. But he says this a lot throughout. He says that all these stories are so crazy, but they can't all be wrong, which I think is an interesting way to look at it and a good place to land. But what it actually means, I think he's left wondering, and just as we are now, which I think was somewhat like comforting, like we're still in the same place, but maybe frustrating from your point of view, from a certain point of view.
Yeah, for sure. Because I kept wanting him to like just say what he thought it was, but he was being good, and he was just presenting everything that came through, everything from the UFO pancakes or the alien pancakes to things that were a little more like just like your basic, like, oh, there was a light, it did this,
Right.
So I appreciate that about him, that he reported everything, even if it was like in the book kind of out there for some people. And what about you, Vinny? Did you from what you were able to listen to, what was your impression?
I'm not going to make that mistake again. I thought I would take the shortcut, give the audiobook a chance, but for a similar thing to what Graham said, it's like, I've got so many books I need to read. I don't need to buy another one. I know I can listen to it on audio. Boy, oh boy. I'm so down for like taking notes and cutting and pasting on of Kindle books and stuff. This was not the wisest decision. But I think what I did get from this was, it seemed that a book written in 1970 really is prevalent to the conversation today when we're talking about extraterrestrials. This, the relevance to religion, demons, things like that, that it's not just focused on one aspect of the phenomena. The fact that it's called Trojan Horse, and it could be concealing something, whether that be hostile or something else, and in the big picture of what it is. The way it talks about folklore as well, it opens the conversation up so much. And listening through this, I kept forgetting that this was something that was written in 1970. It felt like something that was written within the last 5 to 10 years, and that really impressed me, that something could be so relevant in a train of thought that is so old. And that's kind of what I got from it at the base level. Anything in depth, and you know what? That really, it touched home with me when I realized that this was the first book that Sean read after his experience. And that kind of made sense to me, how it kind of appealed to him as well. So Sean, I feel you, bro.
Yeah, this would be an amazing book to find after your first experience, because there's so many unanswered questions when you see one for the first time, and just like the feelings involved in you, everything. So I'm glad that he had this book, because it's probably like having like a friend, like, telling you a bunch of like, I feel like that's the thing about John Keel. I feel like he would be like such a wise person to talk to, just with any experience, because he was so open-minded and accepting of people's experiences, but also, he wasn't going to believe everything right away. So Jay, what was your impressions, or what were your impressions?
Sure. I think I really enjoyed this book. I think, Keel is, on the one hand, as Graham put it, like the book's a product of its time, kind of caught between people like Jacques Vallée and APRO, Coral Lorenzen, Flying Saucer Review, other people that were very much in the mix at the time. And kind of like, it was yet another heyday in many ways of nuts and bolts within the field back then in the late 60s and in 1970 specifically. But at the same time, one thing that I appreciate about Keel, and I think it sounds like so far we all do, is that he was really unafraid to be wildly out of fashion in terms of like in terms of what were the predominant themes of the given day, and somewhat similar to Valet. When we look back, you know, Passport to Magonia, I think was published maybe 8 months before this or something like that, you know, within a year, as I recall. And the thing is that, you know, there are little bits that seem very similar, and when we look back from a retrospective view, we think like, oh, that was part of the milieu because Jacques Vallée was also covering that. But Jacques Vallée at the time in doing Passport to Magonia was also wildly out of fashion. He was like cast out for like a while, as much as one could be from you know, some groups in ufology for thinking the way that he did, just as Keel did. So, you know, in terms of ultra-terrestrials, in terms of intelligent energy, even in terms of transmedium craft, you know, these were like hot button issues at the time. You know, people at the end of the contactee cases, Minger, Von Tassel, people like that, you know, there was a retraction historically towards ufologists wanting to talk occupants at best with regard to craft. They didn't want to talk about Venusia. They didn't want to talk about like what were the physical descriptions of these actual beings at that moment. You know what I mean? They would say UFO knots. They would say occupants. They wouldn't go further than that largely. That was kind of like excised from accounts. And so, you know, even just him mentioning that going into physical descriptions, saying how tall people were, what their complexion was, things like this, that was like even kind of a strange moment for that, you know. And so in that way, you know, I really appreciate that he was talking about that. He was talking about mysterious helicopters, you know, these situations like that are incredibly relevant and still happening, you know, as much as people would like to deny that sometimes. And so in many ways, it seems like the more things change, the more time passes, the more things stay the same sometimes, at least with the data itself. And this was a guy that was kind of unafraid. And even one of the central points going in the early chapters is griping about how many ufologists would edit out data that didn't fit their hypothesis. That's one of his big things in here. And him kind of being brave enough to edit in all of the data and really trying to contend with it seems like part of the central hypothesis of the book, really, when it comes down to it.
Jay, because he mentions towards the end about NICAP withholding a file as well, doesn't he? So it's a bit of a common theme. And of course, people have accused other agencies of hiding things, but actually we're no better than them in terms of, you know, people who are researchers, etc. So yeah, he was spot on there.
Indeed. Completely agreed. And so, and you know, this goes back Donald Kehoe. People have criticized Kehoe for editing out occupant descriptions, you know,
Right.
like quote unquote ET descriptions, things like that. Even though, you know, that guy's like a kind of a hero of mine, and for many people, it doesn't mean that these are perfect people that we were dealing with.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it almost makes you, and I'm a big fan of him too, but you're right, like when does it make you as ridiculous by taking things out as you think the story is ridiculous? It works both ways. So yeah, that's
Totally.
but I like his work too, so it's hard to like say things. But you know, like you said, he's a person just like everybody else. Olaf, what about you? What did you think of the book?
Well, I really liked it. I was really surprised. It felt really current. Like I think I usually have a mental image that the material in the book that it's that old is like outdated and weird, and sure, some of it was, and like Graham mentioned, but so much feels like, oh, we're gonna hear more about these things pretty soon, because obviously everyone has forgotten about this aspect of the phenomenon, and I think we will have researches of all of the aspects of this book in the coming years. And I really enjoy that he even, well, like going out to the fae and like the little people, and like talking about like these kind of, I mean, it's weird stuff, but like when I look into uh, well stuff about ancient rituals and like folklore and stuff like that you have like in the culture, like we have lots of little people in Sweden, and like, you know, the mushrooms and the Amanita muscaria and stuff like that, and I feel like it's part of the phenomenon, and it's just weird how it expresses itself somehow. But I also enjoy that he like that he was talking about the ghost flyers that came before the ghost rockets, and that you had like sightings, and that he was sighting off small towns in the north of Sweden. Like he mentioned Umeå, like that I live in right now, um, and Arjeplog, like a really small little town close to where I grew up. So it's really cool to hear those stuff, and this is a book from the 70s, and I actually never heard about those cases. So it was cool to get like updated with new information, for me at least, with this old book. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. So
Yeah,
I
that's
guess
awesome.
that's all.
Yeah, he really went into depth on so many things, and like the amount of like you know, hands-on and boots on ground research that he did is just, to me, like blows my mind. And the fact that he covered everything, like it's literally like anything that you could think of that would like pertain to the phenomena before we knew about Skinwalker Ranch, and before we knew about all these anomalous places with these different phenomena. He covered it that way, from that viewpoint. Like you said, ghosts, fae, gnomes, you know, all of it. And then he had the flaps, which were kind of crazy to me, that like, how is this happening here and here pretty much at the same time, same day? That's super cool too. And Sean, so you kind of had like, this is what you recommended the book, and you found it right after your first sighting. So can you tell us about that too, and your impressions of the book?
Yeah, sure. So my first sighting wasn't like, you know, a lot of people when they think of UFOs that maybe aren't in the UFO kind of world, they imagine people who say they've had a sighting and think they saw a spaceship, like a saucer or whatever, or aliens, you know, and that's not what I saw. You know, I saw two very close, like white, bright orb ball things that zipped in and out of the dimension or whatever. I don't know what to say. But it was, and they were both really close to me, and they surrounded a dream of mine that came true that I had a couple years prior. So I was in this state of like kind of shock. Like, is there something mentally wrong with me? Is there, you know, did I imagine this? Did it really happen? Is my mind, you know, just trying to mold things to make sense to me somehow, or like, what is the deal? You know, so I knew like reading a book about like Roswell or something about like aliens, like wasn't gonna do me really any good, because that's not what I was looking for, and that's not what my experience was, you know. So I just did a little research like online, just looking, you know, at just synopsis of different books and everything. So I just landed on that one, and I read it, and it was intriguing, and it helped me make a little bit, not more sense of it, but feel more comfortable with my experience, you know, because there was so many different things going on. You know, and it's interesting now, like reading old like bulletins from Flying Saucer Review and stuff like that. Seeing, you know, side by side articles of Jacques Vallée and John Keel, you know, and they were both kind of writing things at the same time and in the same publications. And, you know, there was a time where I don't think they necessarily got along and they disagreed about stuff, and other times where they did. So it's pretty interesting. But there's a lot in that book that stuck out to me, and there's still a lot, that you guys have said that really hits on what hit me at the time, especially with how things are so similar now, all the way from, and I'm guilty guilty of this, but infighting between different groups of ufology or people that are here, and just the phenomenon itself and how it has the innate ability to almost seem to manipulate people into complete confusion. I remember him talking about the materials of all these different crash sites, and people go, they get the materials, they test it, and it's just mundane stuff. It's just metal, or it's whatever, and then going through UFO documents and finding all these crash sites of materials and looking at their lab analysis and actually seeing that it's mundane stuff and it's nothing, weird or spectacular, and seeing pictures of it, and it's like there's a picture in Blue Book of just like a piece of a plane or like a door from a Cessna. It's like, but the Air Force yet went all out every time in retrieving that stuff. And it's like, yeah, it could be just from a plane or whatever, but if it's part of the phenomenon, like it's got this just complete trickster vibe to everything. And going back to like the predictions that I forget who was talking about it, but all these minor predictions that people would make would come true, and it would gain their confidence to the point of where they were told a major prediction and they would spout it to the world, and then it wouldn't happen.
It does. That makes sense to me, because the thing is that what I garnered from listening to it is that this is an early state for me when you first take on board the hypothesis of the ultra-terrestrial, where it isn't necessarily ET or this and that. And we're going back to 1970, and that keeps pinging my brain. But we're talking about ultra-terrestrial, where it could be this or that. It could be related to paranormal. It could be related to demons. It could be related to fairies and folklore and stuff like that. And so that's what really stood out for me. And it's could it be tricking us into thinking it's this and that in 30 years ago, and we're still being tricked now to think it's something else based on another theory? But all in all, it's the same thing. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. This whole
people are just now coming around to that, and he was talking about it then. So
yeah,
we think these.
We think
it's a new thing. It's not.
There's one point that really hits home on that, and it's when he's talking about this prediction that people were making, and I forgot already like what specifically the prediction was, but there were people like that were told things by beings, alien beings, and there were people that do like seances or whatever, and were told things like from different spectrums of things, like not UFO people, like other types of meditation or spiritualist people and UFO people, and they were all given like the same information about the same prediction, and how he's saying like everyone, it almost seems like everyone's tapping like the same source almost, like, but we all have these different faces on it. And I think that's I think that's I can only say so much, because I can't sit here and say, oh, that's true or not. I can only just say how it makes sense, and he really framed it nicely, and the way he wrote it makes sense to me.
So. You have to wonder about he obviously expounds about this at length more in the Mothman prophecies, but when he talks about the earthquake in Turkey that was divulged by this whoever this person or entity was, and talks about the bridge that was going to collapse,
right?
This is just another kind of element of that, but from somebody else. And of course, it was a much more localized kind of phenomenon that was going on hand in hand with a lot of other things that seem to be going on around the kind of Point Pleasant area in 1967. And that was something that actually was quite frightening to me as a kid when I read about Mothman, and obviously because he wrote a complete book about it, but it appears in here as well. But it also appears in another book, which I actually would advise anybody here and in the audience to read, which is Strange Creatures from Time and Space, which is another book he wrote. I believe he wrote it maybe in the mid-70s. It's incredibly difficult to find, and when you do find it, it's very expensive, but it goes all over the place in terms of its subjects, much like this one does, but even more because it talks about things like Bigfoot It has a chapter for everything. It talks about incubi and succubi. It talks about, it's called the bedroom invaders. That's the chapter there. Bigfoot and Big Feet and Little Brains is the one about Bigfoot and some others. These are the chapters I remember. There's only one chapter about UFOs. But they talk about the ghost rockets. He talks about the ghost flyers, as Olaf mentions. It's a really good book. It's like Trojan Horse, but it's subtly different. But you can still see the same elements woven through how he attacked this book to how he wrote that one as well. So that's another one you should really read. He mentions Yazoo, which is an earlier book I believe he wrote, and I think that's to do more with demonology. Now, I've never read that, so I can't comment on it. But certainly the Mothman book and Strange Creatures from Time and Space, if you like Trojan Horse or you like what we're saying about it, get a hold of those as well.
Yeah, cool. I definitely wrote some of those down, and Mostly Space brings up something interesting that I noticed as well. And this is also kind of like Diana wrote about this in her book, American Cosmic, as well, as like a good example of how sometimes when you investigate the phenomenon, it investigates you. And that doesn't have to be a visitation. It could be coming across a document. Do you know what I mean? So people are like, well, I've never seen anything like Vinny's like, oh, I've never seen anything. But you come across these things too, it's almost like it found you. So you can talk about it. So that's definitely interesting.
Just carrying on from what Graham was saying is with regards to Point Pleasant and the Mothman thing. When that happened and you had the bridge collapse as well, that was put on that people had seen Mothman on the bridge as well. And that put the fear into people that carried on for years and years. And then people have associated these massive disasters with a phenomenon as well that has gone down in folklore for years. Whereas it was probably just one person who planted that seed as well. So we've got to be careful about, we're talking about Trojan horses and about things that you are spoken about that may not be true, but it's one person hears it, then 2, then 4, then 8, and it expands into this massive thing over generations. And that's a really important point, I think, especially with that story with Mothman and Point Pleasant. Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yes. It kind of reminds me of towards the end, he talks about how the phenomenon, it seems like it has the ability to manipulate man's mind, to sit in the corners and the dark shadows of your mind and do things like how people, he talks about how people, then would lose their jobs or lose relationships with family members to preach to the world that aliens are here, and
some people get institutionalized, like no joke, kids taken away, like
like reading documents over and over, or reading through all these documents, doing this show, and thinking about the time that I'm not giving to other things that I may have beforehand, and it makes you think, like, what the hell? And what's the point? And it's kind of easy if you think about it to think, well, maybe the point is confusion, but that almost seems too easy too,
Yeah, like wouldn't
because
they
what
have
else would you call
confuse us? Like,
well, I think it kind of speaks to the nature of experience, and this is, I want to get Jay's thoughts on this, but the nature of experience just at all, right? So, I think the book, and we're dealing with this now too, trying to incorporate a lot of different phenomena and make an explanation for it, and we have a tendency to lump those strange things into this category, phenomena. But what's interesting is experience at all, right? So the fact that we have waking experience, have dream experience, have experience, period. We don't focus on that because it's very mundane. It seems mundane to us because we're all quite used to it. What we focus on are the outliers. And I think we may be losing sight here of something that is more fundamental. The outliers, in their absurdity, point to what may be really going on, but we might be missing the point. It's experience itself, and think about how throughout time and history, models of understanding change, and the way experience is interpreted changes, and we like to think, but we like to look back at history and try to, we take our sort of very, kind of microscopic approach to events, and we say, well, this thing happened, it was like this. But really, everything is coming to us through experience. Everything is mediated to us through perception. And so I think that we need to be looking at what lies below all of that, and that's where this may actually be. And what I think that is consciousness itself. But Jay, I would wonder what you kind of think about that from your own experience and how you think about these issues, the absurd and what we would call the normal.
Sure. Yeah, I think that there is like the problem of perception, consciousness, and experience is a vast one. And one interesting thing here is that, I mean, there are a lot of interesting things here. One is that we almost take it as a general assumption that these others, whichever others we're speaking of, and it could be like a whole city phone book of others, you know what I mean? When we try to narrow it down to one person or one group, I kind of always imagine like a classic outdated 1990s New York City phone book, you know what I mean? That it could be like, if we have that many people right here, how many beings could it be existing in the universe or even the multiverse, right? But so why would we find unifying characteristics among every single person that's in there, other than that, they've got fingers or eyes or what have you, they're bipedal, et cetera, right? But when you're talking about issues of communication or issues of perception, we take it as a given that these beings speak telepathically, right? They communicate telepathically, and we somehow, we start to take it as a given that they speak our language, that they use words that we know, that they even use our language bases. And so if you're a geologist, it might make an analogy using a geology term. If you're a Japanese engineer of stereo receivers, it might use an engineering term, right? And somehow we find it strange when it might look different. And it's like, if this other intelligence is accessing our perception at such a deep level that it's able to know what words we know in the language that we know it, then why is it so strange when we see, like, people that are dear to us? You know what I mean? Why is it so strange to us when we see our dead grandparents? You know what I mean? Or something like this. That could be something overlapping and different entirely. But, there's these situations where people will be like, oh, I was on a craft and I saw my mom, but she had passed away beforehand, things like that. And it's, if it's about, we're entering into a hall of mirrors when we're dealing with situations like this. But in terms of like looking at something that's looking back at you, there is a depth that's happening there that's extraordinary. And we assume, I think on some level, when we're dealing with each other, we're dealing with like this very face level. We're dealing with what people are saying. We're dealing with their micro expressions. We're dealing with what you pick up over time from someone. And in a way, that's almost like looking at somebody's desktop. It's like looking at the desktop of somebody's monitor. And it's like, and these beings often seem to be, these entities often seem to be looking at the hard drive instead of the desktop, and that gets at a model of perception that is actually very in vogue among cognitions these days, which is Don Hoffman's case against reality, which is that, we have these five senses and we're actually evolutionarily biased against reality, because what we're here to do is procreate, eat, get by, and not get spooked by weird shit,
What I would say to that, sorry to interrupt, Jay, but
no.
What I would say to that, and just following on from the theme of the book, is these visions and perceptions of our grandparents, like you say, and things like that. But in vain with the book, this Trojan horse that could be throwing these things out there for you to see, for you to believe that these are visions and things of your lost grandparents and that. What if they are just visions to completely put you in the wrong direction, to make you think it's something that it's not, and it, playing devil's advocate, make you think it's all la-di-da, let's say, when in fact it's actually a perception to actually manipulate you in a negative way, because our minds may be very malleable from these, whoever they are. And like I said, I'm playing devil's advocate, but do you see where I'm coming from? It's like,
For sure.
I think that's a good point.
Well, like
We've
on
got,
that
you know,
though, on that note, guys, what if they're not? What if it's neither? What if they're not manipulating us? What if they're just, their energy has this resonance and it's our own interpretation? We're kind of like screwing ourselves not screwing ourselves, but like kind of we're making out, we're perceiving it the only way we can. What if they're not trying to manipulate or bless us or give us future advice, but whatever they're emitting in their energy, or whatever they're like, just their presence and the resonance of it, just, it's so out of our world or out of our dimension that we are kind of just making up what we can understand from something we really don't recognize.
Well, that would explain why you get, sorry, Dorf, that would explain why you get like one situation and 20 different viewpoints, wouldn't it?
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, what if there is no necessarily they? What if our experiences are different and there is 20 different stories, because it mirrors us, because we are all unique to ourselves, just like these experiences seem to be. So what if all this stuff is just one giant ball of consciousness bouncing off of each other constantly? What if my conscious has a way of somehow traveling to somebody else and they're seeing, almost my perception mentally, or I don't know if there necessarily has to be or another intelligence specifically, as much as it could be a side of intelligence or a collective intelligence that we didn't know existed, that we could be experiencing. It's just, something that came to my mind. And it could be wrong. But
it's very interesting
it's
though,
another
because
way to look at it.
I think that's definitely, on the, one of the possibilities, because we have no idea what we're dealing with, but at the same time, like they could have been here like along with us, but not in our, I keep wanting to say resonance. I don't know how else to say it. Because we're, what makes us matter is a very specific, sort of vibration. I'm not even talking woo, like it literally, like, our molecules move at a certain speed. So that makes us humans.
Physics level. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it would make sense that they just might not be like the same density as us, or even vibrate at the same level as us. And for some reason, when they're around us, are they lowering that? Are they changing their, makeup, like of like their physicality, so we can see them? And that's another thing I always think about, because I'm like, where did they go? Like if you see one, it's just like boop, gone, and you're like, the heck, like.
But I really love the idea that maybe they have no control over it at all, and it's only humans who control how we see them, how we perceive them, and they're like, no, don't look at me as a big scary monster, or don't be scared, or don't do like, we have no control over this person, because it's like our subconscious is like just animating it however we like that. We have like a really powerful imagination or something like that, sort of connects to the phenomenon somehow, or I don't know.
Yeah. And
did any of you find, I'm sorry Nathan, go ahead, because this is going to be
I
off
was just
topic.
curious from an artist perspective, Olaf, so how do you understand kind of what is true? How do you understand truth through art? So these are things that I think about artists as like better equipped, or in some ways seeking to try to elucidate these sort of grander mysteries of the human experience. And that comes out in a lot of different ways, in poetry and music and the visual arts and all kinds of things. But there's something that I don't like using this word because I know it has a lot of fuzzy connotations, but we resonate with art, I think for a reason. So how do you think about these issues from the vantage of an artist, about phenomena itself?
Well, I mean, I try to not think about the entire spectrum of the phenomenon, like focusing on the tiny slice that I'm looking at the moment, because to put them together, even in the same image, it's like it's different languages or something. It's hard to visualize them without them negating each other somehow. So like for me to just go into it, and it doesn't matter if it's true or like what I depict really, because it becomes true in that instance sort of. So it's like if you've seen Rick and Morty and they're watching interdimensional cable, and it's like it doesn't matter if the triangle ship is pyramid shaped, but now in this slice of the multiverse, I'm gonna go all in on this aspect and try to mine it for what it's worth, and like obviously try to make a dramatic view or like show off the details or do something to distinguish this is this version, and then maybe I'll make another version the next day. I'll do a new one and then just think of it from another perspective. But I like the idea that you could find your way back to basically the same theory through different phenomena, like even if it's like ghosts or like close death experiences or something like that. But
love that.
Not sure if I answered.
No, that was great. Thank you. Yeah.
You're on mute.
Oh, I was on mute.
No,
Oh no,
Priscilla's on mute.
Priscilla's on mute. Sorry.
Sorry, I
do that all
pressed
the
the comments, so then I couldn't see that I was muted. Yeah, I think that artists definitely see, like, you obviously see things differently, but I think last book club you were talking about that, how you start kind of getting these stories about these beings you're drawing or painting, and it's almost alive, or I just feel like sometimes artists are kind of like shamans in a sense that they're in two worlds, because where are you bringing this out of? Where is it coming from? Do you know what I mean? Like you're just like pulling it out of your head, or you're seeing, it's just very fascinating to me when
It's a
people
muscle.
create things.
Olaf would probably
It's the
agree with
Olaf
me
muscle.
that it's a muscle. No,
Yeah.
like in writing my songs,
Well,
in
same thing with
writing,
music,
in writing
right?
like when I write my lyrics, I would imagine that it's probably very similar to how you paint. Like I don't really think about the subject or the thing I'm going to write about as much as I'm pulling from a muscle that's grabbing things like kind of subconsciously and putting it on paper. And I've been doing it for 20 years, so I don't really think about it anymore as much as it's just a muscle that starts writing words, and it's a way it grooves and flows that it just comes out. Like I could write a line or a song full of lyrics right now, and and a lot of times the meaning or whatever is less important than the act of doing it and creating something out of thin air. And when you're done looking at it and going, now what the hell does that mean? And you may not even know. Maybe sometimes a year goes by and you're like, man, those lyrics are like perfect for this situation I'm going through right now. Then it starts getting creepy. Like, am I predicting the future? Am I pulling? Is my consciousness like pulling from something, which it could be
Right.
like some sort of like a download I'm having at the time or something that we give terms to things and everything. But
Mhm.
maybe a lot of this sometimes I think is more natural, and we just aren't. We haven't developed a relationship with it quite yet.
I think that's a really important point to make as well, because you talk about the artistic side with music and artwork. When I listen to Sean's music or see Olaf's artwork, it resonates so much that it maybe even for those split seconds changes my view on the phenomenon. If I see a piece by Olaf on Twitter and then scroll down, I've got that image, that beautiful image in my head. That might then affect the way I read the next few posts. Do you know what I mean? It really can have that effect, even if it's for a split, 5 to 10 seconds, because you can scroll a lot in 5 to 10 seconds. But when you've seen a beautiful imagery of the phenomena, I'm spitballing here, but there's that real perception difference,
Well, doesn't it, like, it's just like listening to a song that you love, or, like we are affected by beauty, and music is beautiful and art is beautiful, and it's gonna sound hippie, but it lifts well, on a non-hippie thing, we get little, like, bursts of happy hormones when we see stuff like that. So you're gonna be reading things, or, like Vinny says, it's gonna with his peace sign, it's gonna raise your vibes, and you're gonna be happier, so everything you read, like, is maybe something that would've made you mad, like, a minute before you saw Olaf's painting or heard one of Sean's songs would've been, like, made you mad or, like, you know, like, made you react differently, and now you're in a good mood now because you listened to a nice song, you saw a beautiful painting, and you're like, "Oh, that doesn't bother me," like, it just rolls off a little easier. Yes. Sorry.
Well, and along those lines, we're talking about things that are very liminal and ephemeral, and they're kind of like glimpses. You know, there's often that line about, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words and things like that, right? And maybe there's something about that that's more utilitarian or useful within the range. You know, there's an early quote in Keel's book where he's talking about, you know, I think it's in the first 2 chapters where he says, you know, about 1/3 of you will know what I'm talking about, and about 2/3 of you will never believe what I'm talking about. And what he's saying is that if essentially that he's talking about multiple modality experiencers. He's saying that people that have seen a UFO are more likely to have seen a ghost or some interdimensional thing, or to have heard something, or so. And, you know, again, that's something that was like wildly out of fashion and inconvenient as a truth at the time, right? And it gets me thinking, you know, he was trying to get this together like back before, you know, recently, you know, with skinwalkers at the Pentagon, for example, right? You know, back in the original Hunt for the Skinwalker book, there's that well trodden quote about how the ghost people wouldn't talk to the UFO people, and nobody wanted to talk to the Bigfoot people because they were off, you know, at some campsite in the woods, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, towards the end of Operation Trojan Horse, here's, you know, he's starting to put in graphs that are correlating poltergeist and UFO phenomena, things like that were wildly out of fashion for 50 years, only until last year again, where nuts and bolts people like dragged into the position of having to deal with this stuff. By the way, I'll bury this in the middle of this podcast, but like, you know, nuts and bolts, it's always like kind of a funny term to me because like, you know, these crafts are, when they are a craft, they're often seamless. And so nuts and bolts is especially hilarious because these people don't even recognize that there's never a fucking nut or a bolt on the craft to begin with.
I'll hold my hands up to that one because I use that term a lot.
Yeah. And it just makes people on that end of the spectrum sound especially stupid when they absorb that, recognizing that you're talking about a seamless craft. Anyway, so, but like when we're talking about this stuff,
let it out.
We're talking about problems of communication, right? And so when we're talking about music, we're talking about art, we're talking about things that are in this more liminal, in this more ephemeral space. And I think one of the central issues when people in ufology look at ghost people, they look at paranormal people and they think that they're so different. I think one of the problems is the framing device. We talk about accounts, we talk about cases, we talk about what did you see? And so within our frame of reference, it's acceptable to say like, I saw it for 25 seconds, it fits on a chart, it looked like a glowing orb, and then it was gone. Or whatever, right? Whereas within paranormal, I saw a doctoral candidate the other day, a really learned guy who has been kind of like immersing himself in paranormal ghost accounts, right? And even he, within his very, very academic framework, was like, tell me your ghost story. It's always the framing of the ghost story. And that's the problem, is that ghost stories have a beginning, they have a middle, and they have an end. And what people often realize is that kind of narrative, that kind of chronological narrative, where it has to have a clean beginning and a clean ending, goes against almost everything that we know about this phenomena, right?
Right.
And so when we think about like, why does music make more sense, or why does art make more sense when we're referencing things like this, or why, you know, things like aliens and artists, like why are more experiencers in that lane of the highway? It might have something to do with that, you know?
Yeah, I want to know too, because I feel like so many people I've talked to, it's like a little bit of everything after they've had one experience, or it's just, and we're talking like normal people's lives. Like I had a friend that saw a spirit, and then she was outside and she saw a UFO, and that freaked her out. She was cool with the spirit. She's like, "That's grandpa. It's cool." But this thing in the sky is really it freaked her out. But then after that, they started having the movement of things in the house, like poltergeist-like activity, and it's insane. Sorry, Vinny, go ahead.
No, I just have to. Jay has completely made probably one of the best points I've heard for months. Nuts and bolts actually doesn't mean what it needs.
But somebody goes, at least it's not bricks and mortar.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. But Jay, what do we call it? What do we call it?
We need it. You call it reductive.
Research driven.
Wow. Because it really hits home. It makes perfect sense because
I need a term to use so I don't sound really stupid now. So that's what I use all the time.
I feel just gonna be like, I'm a nuts and never mind.
No nuts, no bolts.
Well, and Keel even talks about how they were like, there's no two craft are alike. That was really, it's like there are 12,000 types of craft. What does that tell you right there? That it's
does that mean?
See, I can say, like, reading through all the blue book files that I have, which have been in the hundreds, I don't know that that's necessarily true. At least going by those, which you could say if that's the right thing to do or not. Right. Maybe not. But
Project Sign and Project Grudge categorized them into 5 major groups.
Right. So, those seem to play throughout kind of somewhat correctly throughout, through 1969 at least, But
you and Grandma read so many things.
But the funny thing is, if I now say I'm a nuts and bolts researcher, I'm just gonna have Jay on this. I'm gonna have Jay on my shoulder.
Yeah, we're gonna start mailing you little bags of nuts and bolts.
Nuts and bolts. I'm gonna have Jay. So my question is,
I apologize.
Who am I gonna have on the other shoulder though?
Yeah, I don't know. Just say you're baby walking.
They got Jay on one shoulder. There's no nuts. There's no bolts.
What are you talking about?
Is that
I don't
nuts
know
and
if
bolts
there's anything even here. What do you mean?
You might need a whole crew, Vinny, because I don't know how to answer that.
We're completely flipping the script right now, but this is again. I think that's a great point, which is an overall thing of this book as well, is because he goes into this fact that. And this is that term that I will keep going back to, is ultra-terrestrial, because we keep, or the community keeps talking about extraterrestrial.
Well, he mentioned that in the book too, didn't he?
Ultra-terrestrial, interdimensional, but ultra-terrestrial now seems to cover a whole gambit.
Oh, yes.
More because extraterrestrial, it is what it is. But
it covers angels, it covers demons too. Yeah. It covers anything somebody has seen.
Now we need to start really breaking down these things. And we don't have the answers, but we got to get the verbiage right. We've got to get the verbiage right now. And
but you can see how our models carve out that space for us, though.
Jay on my shoulders talking.
Right. So,
if it helps, I'm on a diet, so at least it'll weigh a little bit less by spring.
I'm kidding. I love you, Jay.
Says he wants to get a camera right there so he can see the bolt in it.
Oh, that's right, he did. Made in wherever.
What are you talking about, bolts? Man, you're the wrong guy for this. No, I'm just kidding.
Right, but talking about the ultra-terrestrials, it's all about the models that open up to us, and then what then occupies the new space, the new frontier that is created. So, because we are now dealing a lot with quantum physics and these sort of multiverse ideas, then so too the ideas of interdimensional beings, ultra-terrestrial beings, these come in to fill that new space that has been made. I think we have to remember that that's never going to stop, right? There's sort of this idea every generation that arrives on this earth and experience has this period of time where you think like, we've kind of got it figured out here. We have a general sense of what's happening. And if I flip back through the history books, like they were pretty confused. This is actually what it is. They had it wrong. Well, the history books of tomorrow will look back at this time and go, the models they had were not quite right. And so, I think we have to have that kind of humility, to land where Keel lands, at least for me in this book, I think he lands in this place. If we do think that there are ultra-terrestrials, he's saying to us, you cannot trust them. And I think that's an
Mm.
important message to wrestle with, right? Because we have a
Yeah.
lot of folks that have experiences that say, well, they told me this, they told me this is going to happen. He's saying, yeah, sometimes that stuff does happen, but it's not necessarily trustworthy. And so I resonate with that a lot because things like the messages that they say we shouldn't be playing with nukes. I mean, who says if they're trying to stop us from doing that, they're not doing like an excellent job at it. We detonated a lot of nukes.
Right.
And you go to just Graham's work on UFOs before Roswell, and it's like, I don't know if it's the nuke thing because, before they existed, like there was, going back throughout the course of time, there's been sightings in the sky. And, if they wanted to stop us from, using nukes or whatever, where were they when we were doing the Manhattan Project? Why didn't they do something before we even created them?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
why didn't they confuse our brain and make us forget the equations we thought of to make this stuff to begin with?
Right.
Or,
Yeah, and you can't use
there's
the free will thing for that because they've obviously turned off things, and that's kind of a violation of free will. So you can't always go back to they're not going to violate your free will. Like it doesn't work in every scenario. Some of it maybe, but some of it doesn't. And that's hard for me to say too because I want to think that they're not going to mess with us unless they're going to help us, but we just don't know. And there's enough experiences that are both positive and negative that it makes you question. And he might not even say like don't trust it like in a menacing way, but just in general, like you can't trust it because you don't know. But keep talking. I just want everybody to like put your book suggestions in the chat. So unless you're on screen, then you can just tell me. But keep talking. I'm gonna have people put their things in the chat. That way I can start writing them down. But go ahead, Graham.
Yeah, sorry, that goes back to the Trojan Horse element, doesn't it? About things on what they seem. But imagine if Keel had been around 50 years afterwards and he'd written that book, like in 2020, he would have been all over Skinwalker, wouldn't he? Because the things that are happening there, all these multiple strands and different elements and diverse things, that would have ticked so many boxes in terms of what he was talking about there. But also, you just wonder what you would have made of the current state of ufology. People like Luella Zondo and Chris Mellon, the FLIR videos, the nuts, sorry, not nuts and bolts, the seamless shape of the tic tac. Sorry, I had to do that. Sorry, Jay. What would he have made of the tic tac? And what kind of phenomenon that is, and West Coast, East Coast, all this kind of stuff. People like Anjali, love her or loathe her or have no feelings whatsoever on her. She is effectively a contactee, as what the word used to be. They call it something different now, but that she is effectively the 2021, 22 version of what was happening in the 50s and 60s. So
I feel like Keel would go, yeah, I've seen this before.
Exactly. Everything he was writing about in the 70s, it's just reinventing the wheel, isn't it? And ufology does that. This subject does basically reinvent itself, but the stuff is exactly the same, just packaged differently or as a different name.
Like Lou Elizondo, you could argue, is there was Dr. McDonald, James McDonald. There was Kehoe. There was Kehoe who, Ancient Aliens, that new episode, was just talking about this recently, where the Armstrong Circle Theater, where they had the Air Force and Kehoe or whatever, talking just about, UFO stuff. And Kehoe starts talking about the Air Force, and he had a script that he had to stick to. And he was about to start, going off about the Air Force and how much they suck. And his recording mysteriously went out, and the Air Force, you can see him talk about that in the Blue Book files, It's pretty interesting. And you could relate that to people that are on the main stage now, for better or for worse. Unfortunately, it's key to see the differences for sure, but it'd be very easy to say, I've seen this before. How is this different? But and there are differences, but it's key to note what those are. Like the first public congressionally passed, UFO study. That's never happened. So
one of the things along those lines that I thought was interesting was him talking again about with regard to the Air Force. He was talking about that study called like Case 14 or something like that was written with Battelle, and he was talking about how many cases there were and how it actually kind of gelled with with what he had at the time. And of course, one thing to note that we kind of buried here is that so far is that one of the reasons why Keel was so well read in terms of, and had his ear so close to the ground, was not just that he was on the ground and he was talking to people, like literally knocking on doors, but also he was a subscriber to clipping services, which was like a really kind of rare thing back in the day. And this is what people did, researchers before the internet, where they would they would subscribe to clipping services with certain topics, and they were like keywords. And so you'd ask this clipping service that collected tons and tons of regional newspapers from all over the world, and they would go, Xerox and clip articles, and they would send them to you each month that were pertinent to these keywords. And so Keel was one of the very few people back in those days that was subscribing to clipping services with ufology or UFO cases as like a keyword, right? And so that continues to be one of the points of relevance for him. But anyway, so like one of the situations here is that the Air Force put out this report with Patel, and it was talking about air cases, right? And when we talk, and as Sean was saying, like, oh, what would he think about like Elizondo? What would we think about Mellon? Things like that. What would Keel think about that? We're still, one of the things there is that Keel is like, why did they do this? Why did they put those cases out there? I agree with it. Why did they do that? And my contention would be they did it because it kept the view through the telescope. It kept the view of the phenomenon in the sky, miles away from interpersonal cases. It kept them away from contactee cases. It kept them away from non-human entities. It kept them away from orbs. You were talking about something that was in the sky. And it became, and so like all sorts of phenomena, all sorts of things within the phenomena were off the chart entirely. Literally, they were not on the chart. And that actually like held for many, many years after that happened. And I think it was 1953. So, that's 69 years ago or whatever it was or 59, 59 years ago, whatever it was that somehow the Air Force in Battelle, like successfully got like a whole swath of ufology away from contactees, away from what would be interpersonal accounts. And
it's like we're kids and so the parents turned on the iPad for them just to have them looking at something like,
but I think
it's a guess anyway.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, but if we talk about the ATIP revelations of 2017, if it happened to be the ORSAP revelations of 2017, we probably wouldn't have seen that, because the ORSAP studies were about individual cases. We know that ATIP was military cases. If ORSAP was the program that was revealed, or potentially could have been revealed in 2017 with regards to individual cases with members of the public, that probably wouldn't have happened, or it wouldn't have made an impact like it would with regards to the implications of military and national security infrastructures and cases regarding that kind of stuff. So is that kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Vinny. Yeah.
Well, it speaks to how truth is going to be mediated to the world, right? So what, we're all going to be listening and looking for those voices in our spheres of concern that we go, yeah, okay, I believe that, I trust that. But I think what I struggle with today is, what are those voices? There's very little trust in the public sphere in pretty much anything. So if we're going to be if the government's going to sort of reveal some of these secrets, it's going to have to do so, in my opinion, through a sort of multidisciplinary, multimodal voice sort of situation. It needs scientists, it needs other academics, it needs military, it needs politicians, it needs all of these different people saying, yeah, there really is a thing here. Because if you just have sort of the DOD say it, you're going to have a lot of folks being like, I don't trust the Pentagon. That's just that's a false flag.
It's interesting because as I see like things like Avilov, I just thought of this recently in Project Galileo. It takes me back, not that I was there, but this is all I've studied, but it takes me back to the Condon report. And reading documents from 1959 about how they want to transfer the UFO program to out of SAFOI, the public relations aspect, and out of the defense aspect, and just look at it for scientific purposes. And they have to conduct this huge public education campaign first, because one of the downfalls will be the American public will think that the Air Force isn't on top of it, So, and then a few years later, they have the Condon Report, which is with all these academics and all these, big shot people who studied this thing for over a year, and then wind up saying, there's nothing to it. Meanwhile, during that whole year, I'm sure they're, imagine if we were back then, what would we be thinking about that? Wouldn't we be excited that, oh man, the University of Colorado is studying this? Condon's doing this. Wow, this is going to be great. They're going to find this, they're going to find that, and we're going to know about it. It's going to be awesome. Then it comes, and they're like, "Hey, listen, man, you ever hear about lightning?"
Yeah. If anybody wants to know the project, the report that Jay was talking about, it's Project Blue Book Special Report number 14. It was made available in October 1955, and it was a study of about 3,000 odd cases that were amassed up to that time. And you're right. The Battelle Institute were involved. It led to a kind of standard kind of reporting questionnaire kind of stuff. So it's pretty interesting. It was made public then. I've just noticed one of the recommendations in the chat: Antarctica and the secret space program from World War II to the current space race. If you pick that one, every time you come to me, I'll just laugh. That's all I'll do. I'll just laugh. And that'll be my comment.
Well, we had to be fair, but on that, let's get. So Nathan messaged it and he put it in the chat. He's very thorough. So I got Nathan. I got Vinny's beforehand because I thought he was.
No, wait, no. I've changed.
Wait, are you
mine.
changing it? Well, do you want me to keep it in there, or you want me to take it out?
I'm changing.
So take it out.
Take out what I suggested earlier.
All right.
Before he passes out, goddammit.
Oh, wait, we're supposed to throw it in the YouTube chat rather than the
no.
chat?
I'm going to ask you right now.
Talk about it.
Oh, okay.
All right. So, okay. Well, Vinny wants a redo. So, Vinny.
You want me to give it to you now?
Yeah.
I'm going to go with something that I think has been covered quite well in the UFO world recently, but I think we need to do a deep dive on it, and it is in plain sight.
Somebody put that one in the chat, so it's on the list 2 times.
I've read it
put it
twice.
In there twice if 2 people suggested it.
I've read it twice. I've spoken to Ross. I think it needs a deep dive by
Pricilla,
Quantum Witch UAP Book Club.
I thought that too. I think I suggested it last time. So yeah,
I guess get him to do a live reading of the section with his voices. I'd be down for that.
No, Nathan, you've got to do the voices, bro.
All right. So Jay, what is your suggestion?
Oh my gosh. Let's see.
Oh, sorry. I think I failed to tell you to bring a book. I'm so sorry. We can come back to you.
All right. Okay, what's it going to be? I can only pick one, right?
Hey, I can do Olaf and Sean, and then we can come back to you while you think about it.
Passport to the Cosmos, John Mack. That's
okay, cool. I haven't read that.
Good choice.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a real mind bender. It'll be good. Yep.
All right.
If I were to pick 2, it would be Dimensions by Jacques Vallée, because that's one of the next ones.
Choose one. You've just thrown a spanner in the way.
I know.
I wanted that one. I wanted that one the other day. I was thinking about that one, so
I've got that one.
I will put that as mine because I want to read that one too.
I'll put
read his
Messengers of Deception.
Oh yeah.
Is that your book or is that too. You? Sorry, say it again.
Messengers of Deception.
Yep.
Men in Black, Universal Pictures, 1998.
Mike drop. Wait, that's in book form?
I like how a lot of these books could be
I kind of hope
metal
you pick
bands.
the Antarctica one just because I want to see you.
No, please.
I have to put it in.
Well, I'll just laugh.
He's like, I don't want to play anymore.
You know what? I'm sure I got the dates wrong for all of that. I was just trying to make a joke.
So, what's your suggestion, Olaf? Or
I pick Alien Agendas by Richard Dolan.
Not bad.
I just finished.
That'd be weird if G had to read that.
Oh, I actually, I think what Sean's mentioning is that I'm actually a source in that book. I also, I helped out with that book.
Yeah, but you understand that you've got to get Richard on the show when we
Yeah,
discuss
that's my
it in
rule.
a
I was
month's
like-
time.
Because I tried to get people on, but I could not get anybody. Obviously, not John Keel. But
He's squirrely, but I might be able to do it.
I think there's like so many of you that know people that we should definitely be able to get somebody on.
Sure.
All right, so I'm gonna read them. I'm gonna go back.
Do you want mine as well? Did he get mine? Sorry.
Oh wait, you gave it to me before? Is it still?
It's called Nuts and Bolts
triangular?
Part 2.
Triangular. Yep, I wrote it down earlier because I
There
didn't know
we
if we were
go.
gonna.
Nice,
There
David
we go.
Marler. Very nice.
All right, mostly space says we should read some Martha Stewart. UFO cooking show. Let's do it.
Great choice,
okay.
Graham. Great choice, Graham.
Snoop Dogg wrote a good book, UFOs Knows.
Graham,
Graham,
I'm sorry,
All right.
Graham. I think your bookshelf is gonna explode if you try to get.
He's like shoving them in there.
You haven't seen the
Look
ones
at the
that
ones in the
side,
middle.
and you haven't seen the ones out of the top yet either.
All right, guys. So we got Alien Agendas by Richard Dolan. And Laura, yes, I have yours. I saw that she didn't know if I got it. Messengers of Deception from Sean. I'll put Dimensions for myself because I've been wanting to read that one.
Is that Jacques Vallée?
Yes, Jacques Vallée, sorry.
Oh,
Passport to the Cosmos, John Mack.
Yep.
You're going to cut all the papers the same size this time, guys. I'm not just ripping pieces off. In
Wait, can I
Plain
change
Sight.
mine? I'm gonna pick 300 UFO cases in.
Oh my
copy them
gosh, I
and
thought
email
you
them to
gave yours
everyone,
when
and
you were
we'll just read
talking.
them.
I'm so
Just
sorry.
kidding.
I'm a jerk.
Right, Graham? We'll just have everybody read 300 different cases, and we'll come up with our own.
Yeah, we've all got time. We've got time for that.
Mhm.
So if Sean
You
gets picked, then he's gonna give us a homework list. Did you give me your book?
Yeah, Messengers of Deception.
Okay,
yo.
that's it. When you said that, I was like, I thought I got your book. Don't confuse me. Come on, I'm trying to read things here. Passport to Magonia, and that is recommended by Deb. I think, yeah, Deb. Study of UFO, UAP. Invincible College
Shout
by
out,
Jack
Deb.
Lee.
Shout
All
out,
the
Deb.
cabbies.
We got the
All
Antarctica
the
one. It's
cabbies.
already in there. Earth
So we got-
Grids
So we've
by
got
Human-
3 play books in there. It's like a crazy. It's one of those. It's like watching the Emmys and you see like 4 nominees from the same show. It's like, okay, I get it. Ted Lasso's gonna win.
Alien Bedtime Stories, revised by Grant Cameron. Contact Modalities, Keys to the Universe. That was a long title, so I didn't write the whole one out. But I will post it if that one gets picked.
Yeah, hopefully we get the Men in Black one.
We got a lot this time because people are like showing up.
Does that mean we have to get the Man in Black to come on and talk about their book?
Wait a second. Isn't it funny that no one's even realized at this point that the government has told us about Men in Black and we don't even pay attention?
Well, that's a great point, That is a really good point. When I spoke to David Clark,
Aliens live in lockers.
No, dude, listen, in the UK, when I had my interview with David Clark the other day, and we was talking about a Men in Black case, he actually tracked down one of the Men in Black in a case and was actually speaking, and I was actually speaking to one of the Men in Black of that case. He tracked them down and got into a conversation with them.
Where's he from?
Yorkshire. I don't know, but like this is the thing, they're not like these mystical beings. He was just some dude who was part of defense intelligence or something. This is the thing, it's like these mystical beings that are Men in Black.
John Keel wrote about them.
Aren't they supposed to be just normal people? Like,
they're shorter
shorter
of the Asian type.
How far do you want
guys,
to
we have a lot of
take the
suggestions. I did
conspiracy?
get them all. I'm going to start folding. That way I'm not reading them off forever. But I kind of want to see
All right.
people's faces sometimes.
Let's do
Incident
it.
at Devil's Den. Eve Clancy recommended that one. Oh,
Vinny's contention that all MIBs are actually really real people makes me think that next month I'm going to have to propose Penetration by Ingo Swann.
Oh, dude, I'm down with that. But what you have to is these guys could all be from Yorkshire, UK. That changes everything.
everybody bring a pic from Yorkshire.
Oh boy. Let's not go there.
All right.
That's why the UK is so weird about this stuff. Maybe.
But dude, Yorkshire, man, is like force-fed
What?
crumpets.
Yeah,
everything.
my brother-in-law's from
All right,
Yorkshire.
guys, you're
and
gonna
he'd
tell
be
me
the
when.
worst Men in Black
Tell
ever.
me when. Tell me when. Tell
Doing
me
the
when.
shuffle.
When?
All right, Vinny. Let's see what you picked.
It's all on me now. It's all on me.
Feel the pressure.
You know what? James Iandoli sent me because I made a post saying, "Tell me what books you want to suggest."
Good shout.
And
Good
then I
shout.
got stubborn afterwards, but I already had James because he sent it to me. But that's what I picked, and it is Alien Agenda by Jim Mars. He says it's an older book, but it's really
Wow,
good.
yep.
So,
Nice.
Very.
You're so close.
So close.
Wolf. You're so
Yeah,
I
close.
know,
One
I know.
letter.
Sorry, Graham. You'll have to read the Antarctica one.
Oh,
Yeah.
isn't this going to be like a big conspiracy book? Jim Mars.
Is it?
Jim
Yeah,
Mars is pretty
yeah.
out there.
I read
Next.
it a few years ago.
Can we do one more? Can we do one more?
Okay,
Next.
you can pick from two.
Group.
All right.
Can we do? Yeah.
Okay, vote. I'm gonna tell
can't-
James that you got. I'm
I
gonna,
hate
I'm gonna
doing
call
that.
you out.
Yeah.
So James,
Sorry,
they were
James.
worried. I'll read
I'll-
that one.
Tom DeLong actually.
We could
said
always do like
that's
a
the
rule, like
author
if you're
he'd
not here, you
recommend.
don't get a thing. Maybe. Or if you're not in the
yeah,
chat.
that's kinda,
All right, Vinny, that was your fault, anyways. Come on.
yeah.
When?
All right, grab it, Priscilla. Grab it.
That's my
We're supposed to
connection.
tell you
It
when
was
to grab
a
it.
late connection.
Oh, my finger just went right into this one.
Go.
Incident at Devil's Den.
No.
All right, Terry.
Next.
Love
All
it.
right.
Right.
So
All right.
Next.
Okay, so
stop.
Yeah,
Going
Sean's
on
up
to you
then.
now.
all right.
Yeah, I think
So
that
now
I'm
what do
gonna
we do?
start.
We flip the coin? Is that what we do?
No,
Do
we
we
have.
have
Oh
a-
yeah, you're right. Because we can't like. All right.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I feel like we should do like an anonymous vote.
We
I
could
don't know
do
how
a
to do
vote.
this.
We have to
How-
now going forward.
Yeah,
Month
let's
by
do a
month.
vote.
Okay.
We
We
could
have
do it
two
like a
books going forward. You get to pick one.
Right.
No, we have to have.
Can you do like a YouTube
quarterfinals
poll?
and
Is
then-
that
Yeah.
possible?
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
do that. I can
I
do
think we
like
have
a.
to.
I can do like an
Whatever
Instagram,
one
not
I pull out of
Instagram.
my mouth is the one.
Twitter poll.
Twitter.
No
there we
offense.
go.
That,
I'm like,
Yeah,
what's
that,
the one
do
with the bird?
that
All right,
came out
guys,
of
it's
the
gonna be a
chat. No
Twitter poll.
offense.
Yeah,
No
Twitter
offense
poll.
to the
We
chat,
can-
but
You let it run through the rest of the weekend or something like that.
That
I
one
think
was
we could-
James. Yeah. So we'll run it through the weekend. I'll put these both up, and I try to keep these, but I think that I kind of want to make it like if you like
Fair
if I
is
make a
fair.
post.
We have to read Alien Agenda.
like, the thing is, listen, and I'm going to throw this out there. We're the ones that have to do the reading and the talking and all the.
That's true.
research
No,
on it.
no, yes.
No offense to everyone in the chat. You guys have great, like, we love you, but
Uh-oh.
the last two, like the previous one, the Jim Mars and the Terry Lovelace one, I struggle with. Like,
not
does anybody else share this with me?
Go
Graham,
and
I-
Yeah, well, the
Unsubscribe.
Jim Mars book I might struggle with because I have read it. The Terry Lovelace one I've gone nowhere near, and I don't know anything enough about it to comment. But from what I've just done a quick Google search on it, I'm going, okay, I'll struggle, but I'll do it.
yeah, I
But
think we
I
need to.
might not enjoy it, but that's just me. But I might need to read it. I don't know.
I mean, like one of the benefits of like having suggestions though is to make us read something, and we all have like precious time. Like I'm reading these books to the kids at nighttime, so I could get them to like, bedtime story. Pass
No,
it to
but what I'm
Magonia.
thinking is that, and
John Keel,
I sound like an ass.
No,
talking
you
about
don't
this,
sound
but
like that at all. No, I get it. I get it.
Unsubscribe from his channel
Why don't we
right
do the
now.
vote thing? I
But
think
what-
that's the
but
fair
what-
thing.
No,
And
but
then
what I'm
moving
thinking.
forward,
Listen to my thoughts though. Is like Ross Coulthard. I
I
get
want
Ross
Ross
to talk to
Coulthard
us.
so bad.
Jacques
but-
Vallée, Dimensions. I could get Jacques to join us for half an hour. I think
I
that's
don't think so.
or do we go or do we go
That's
completely conspiratorial? But this is the thing: do we go completely conspiratorial? Like, where's the line? And I sound like a
Go
dick.
to
I'm
bed.
sorry, but
You don't sound like a dick. You don't sound like a dick.
Mm-mm.
where do we
Um,
draw the line?
Well,
but I
Ross
agree.
Coulthard.
with
I think that well, if you're not into
Oh,
the conspiracy stuff, it gives you a grounds to kind of say why you're not as well. So I'm gonna do the poll. Because I think that's fair.
Olaf, I think you're about to back me up.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. I think maybe we should rethink like how we do this. Maybe this isn't supposed to be in the show, but more like in a behind the scenes kind of setting. But
I'm sorry.
but
I'm
I feel
sorry.
like maybe in going forward, because like if we have like 100 books in
Yeah,
the jar,
you're right.
and just it's so random what we can
I mean,
pick
I'm
out.
open to I'm
So-
open to suggestions
Let's-
on how to do
The
it better,
phenomenon
guys.
truly is a
So-
trickster. It's at work right now.
Yeah,
That's right. It doesn't want us to have the real answer, the good answer.
But maybe we could have like that each show you record like our picks on the panel, and then we have a poll that everyone can.
Oh,
Ooh,
okay.
yeah.
Good
Yeah.
idea.
And then we
Yeah.
can choose people that maybe can come onto the show. Like it doesn't really matter, but it's fun to talk to the author, and
Yeah,
we have
for
a
sure.
chance to spread more, like to share like everything, like and build something bigger. And it's easier if the person is alive, for example.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that shouldn't like.
What do you got against dead people, dude?
Yeah, exactly. No, so maybe that shouldn't be a
Person
rule,
has
but
to be live.
Yep.
Anti-dead
can
folks.
control
All right.
it
Well,
a
we'll do
little
the
bit.
poll this time and then hang out afterwards. I'm open to like talking. A lot of you have been with me at the beginning, and I had to say, like, I did put a post on UFO Twitter asking for suggestions, and only one person answered. So to me, and then I do think it's fair. You know, maybe I could limit it, be like, oh, we're only picking the first 10 from the chat, and they could just like type it fast. That way, we don't
Yeah.
have like 1,000 in here. That way, because I really want the community to be involved as well too. So. Or we do what we did
I'm
today.
sorry
We just
to
keep doing the
spoil
poll.
it.
No,
You're a
it's
jerk, dude.
you're fine. You're fine.
Can't believe
So
it.
what we'll do going
Eh.
forward is I'll pick a number and be like, okay, first 10 from the chat gets a pick, and then people just have to learn how to type really fast, and then but I like
Oh,
Olaf's
man.
idea too, but I don't think I don't want to be exclusive either. Especially since, you know, I want to start doing more like with everybody on Twitter, like weekly, just to talk about whatever book we end up picking. So, but I am open to suggestions to make this more like, you know, flow better and all that stuff. So we will do a poll of incident at the Devil's Den and Alien Agenda, and oh my gosh, an Alien Agenda by Jim Mars. So I'll do a poll, and then if people want to read it, they can read
I don't
it.
care what we read. I just like you picking. It's exciting. Pick again.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll do the poll for this one. We picked two.
Oh,
What's
Linda's got a good point there when she's Linda Thompson, when she says, I thought book club was to expand your mind to areas that you wouldn't normally read. I mean, it's
Right.
true. However, if somebody in the chat did put
Thanks, Linda.
a book that was recognized to be universally panned, like the one that that somebody wrote about Roswell, about the nurse, and apparently it's just completely made up. From what I hear, if we
could
end
go
up
read
picking
about
something like
stowing.
that, then we might end up just everybody just universally panning it from start to finish, and it wouldn't be much of a show. So I think we've got to be careful we don't go down that kind of alley.
Yeah,
Totally,
and it
that's
gets kind of conceptual at times because people want to talk about like, you know, things that are aspects of the phenomena, you know, that aren't actually related, that aren't the book's not about the phenomena or about UFO UAP, but it is about something like telepath, you know, stuff. And I don't mind, I like reading stuff like that. Like, guys, I'm a witch, I like all the weirdness. But yeah, so I'll put those up in a poll. Thank you for everybody's suggestions. Thank you if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on Anomalous Podcast Network. All of our guest information is in the description, and if it's not, I will get it on there, but I'm sure it is. And yes, give us a like, a thumbs up, whatever feedback you can get. If you're looking to support the channel other ways, please visit the links below, and everybody has them. Have a
Pick
great night,
again.
everybody. Hang out, guys. See you guys soon.
Go, peace
Bye.
out.